So it's 10:01. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order for the South Carolina Commission on Disabilities and Special Needs. Would like to welcome everyone to this Skype meeting. Before we get started, would like to let everybody in the public who might be watching know that in the event, for some reason, this meeting ends prematurely by a button getting clicked improperly or some problem on the web, that we do have the ability to restart the meeting, but it will have to be under a new link. If that does happen, we have prepared an emergency backup link that will be posted to the website within just a couple of minutes. That's just a what if. This is not if you as an individual leave, but if the meeting itself ends for some reason prematurely. With that being said, we'll go ahead and begin the meeting, and I would ask Commissioner Unum to read the welcome and notice of meeting statement.
A meeting notice announcing the date, time, and place of the April 16th, 2020 Commission meeting at April 14th, 2020 to appropriate media and other groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs Central Administrative Office and on the website. The public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreters, mobility assistants, or other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested in advance.
Thank you, Lori. And just as a matter of to avoid the feedback for the rest of the commissioners, if you're not talking, it is helpful to make sure that the microphone is muted until such time as you want to talk. So with that being said, the next item would be to adopt the agenda, which was proposed and sent out. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I so move or second, whichever David Thomas here.
So Commissioner Thomas has made the motion. Do we have a second?
I wanted to clarify one thing before we accepted it, or ask one thing. It says under everything is good, by the way, and they did a very good job of what I said at the last meeting, but under Carnivus update number D, it says that the boards continue to receive the band even though they are closed, and typically in the past we've only been closed for a couple of days. My question is, did Pat say that, or I thought Mary said that whenever Mary and I were going back and forth, and not Pat, and it makes
we're approving the agenda right now, not the minutes.
Yeah, Mary.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I thought you said minutes. I'm very sorry.
No, and if I did, if I misspoke, that's my fault. So we are on the agenda, so I apologize. So Commissioner Thomas had moved to approve the agenda. Do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Malphurs. And then what I will ask is that if we'll just, if we could just go down the list, and if everybody could just vote aye or nay for that. Lori, since you're right next to me on my screen, I'll go ahead and ask that you go next.
Aye.
David.
Aye.
Barry. And Robin.
Aye.
Okay. The agenda is therefore approved without opposition. Next item on that agenda is the invocation. Would recognize Commissioner Unum for that.
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, as we gather virtually today for this meeting, we pray that you will be in our midst. Lord, these are difficult times in our state, in our world. We ask your blessings on the individuals with disabilities and special needs whom we serve, on all the direct staff who are showing up for them every day to work with them, help keep them safe, on everybody working direct or indirect on their behalves, all those who have lost jobs and are struggling to make ends meet, Lord, and those who have other needs that you know. Lord, I thank you for everyone who has called into this meeting today, for these are the people who've shown a commitment to help the population we've been called upon to serve. We seek your blessings and your guidance. In your precious name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. Did anybody have any corrections, clarifications, or changes to the proposed minutes?
I did. I just wanted to ask about what I was just asking about, and I'm very sorry I did that early. That was terrible, but I'm discombobulated because of trying to do it this way. But anyway, it just, I mean, there's nothing wrong with what the minutes say. It's just, I'm wondering under Carnivus update, where it says, typically in the past, we've closed only for a couple of days in a time during weather issues. And technically we can recap for attendance being lower than 80%. I think it should say recoup instead of recap. But the other big thing was, and it says that, but we don't want our providers to go out of business. Of course, none of us don't, although I don't think that would if they did. Although I don't think that would. But what I'm getting at is, it makes it appear here that Pat said that, and I think Mary said that whenever her and I were going back and forth about whenever I asked whether we paid if the day programs were closed. And I didn't know if Pat also said that, or if that should say Mary said that part.
Okay. Mary or
ask
Pat,
Mary
do you have a
that.
recollection?
I was basically bringing this up to ask Mary, did she say that or did Pat say that?
It says Director Poole stated,
Where?
with the day programs being our biggest revenue loss right now, we are encouraging providers to serve the service units in another manner. We are doing this with DHHS's guidance. The boards continue to receive the band even though they are closed. It says Director Poole stated at the start of that whole narrative. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see
Yeah.
that. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead. Okay, that's fine.
All right, so
Okay,
there
well,
was
then I'll make a
The
motion.
only, I have one change too, or one.
Well, it does need to say recap instead of recoup
That's
instead of
fine.
recap. But other than that,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
okay, go ahead.
Just one minor edit on page 3. It should be Blackwood and not Blackwell on page 3 for the approval of the meeting minutes.
Sandra
People
is
do-
aghast.
People do that all the time. I say Blackwood and people say Blackwell right back to me. So it's very common to do that. So, okay, that's it.
Can you just change your name, Robin?
It'd be easier than changing the minutes.
It would be easier.
Okay, with those two amendments, I believe that Barry had made a motion to approve the minutes as amended. Do we have a second for that?
Second.
Okay, that's Lori seconding. And again, if we could just run down and have the vote in the same order, going to go Larry, David, Barry, and Robin, just because that's the order that you're in on my screen. So Lori,
Aye.
David,
Aye.
Barry, and Robin.
Aye.
Okay, those minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda is the commissioner update.
Okay. Did we not do a motion first? Okay. Okay. Who motioned?
The motion was from Barry, and the
Okay.
second was
Thank
from Lori.
you.
Yeah. Are we good?
We're good.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the commissioner update. Does anyone have any updates for us?
I just had one very quickly, unless somebody else wants to go first.
No.
Go ahead, Barry. Thank you.
I just wanted to say very quickly that that when I was watching one of the briefings by the president, I just wanted to say that Betsy DeVos, our great Secretary of Education, this was right around the first part of this pandemic in the middle of March, said that that she was going to do all that she could to see that not only during this virtual, they were going to recommend virtual education, but during that time she was going to do all that she could to see that not only people children without disabilities, but children with disabilities would receive the same value of their education as best as she could. And I thought that was very interesting. And I just think that it's worth mentioning that she's such a wonderful Secretary of Education, in my opinion, because she's concerned about not only about all children, but about children with disabilities, but also that she believes that public schools, private schools, and charter schools, and home schools, and all the schools should be supported based on what the parents think. So I just think that's very interesting, and it was very good of her in front of the president to mention people with disabilities.
Thank you. Any other updates? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to the old business. The first item under that would be the report from Lori Manos regarding case management.
Good morning, guys. Thanks for letting me come speak with you today. We have our monthly update related to case management. The slides that I'll be going over are in your packet from pages 83 through 89 if you want to reference them. The first couple of slides are your normal how we did for the month of March. The rate increase that was implemented on 1/1/20 is also reflected in those numbers. And we continue to see an overall rate increase of a minimal like 0.85% related to the rate increase. Our numbers for March were up a little bit from February in all categories. We did continue to have a few billing errors and Medicaid ineligibles, but those remain very minimal. And we had 337 consumers in March that were enrolled in the waiver that didn't receive a contact. That represents 2.8% of the waiver population. And that number was a decrease from February. If you'll recall, we kind of had a spike in January, so we saw it go down significantly in February. And then it went down even a little more in March. We've looked at the revenue for April to analyze the impact of case managers only being able to, or primarily being able to bill the non-travel rate in the situation that we're in right now with COVID-19. We looked at face-to-face units versus non-face-to-face units in February and in March. And what we saw was there was a significant decrease in non-face-to-face units, but we did have an offset of that by an increase in non-face-to-face units. So I think the issues related to looking at this billing analysis, we had a little bit of a rate increase in, or a little bit of a revenue increase in March. There were more billing days in March than there were in February. So there were 22 billing days in March. There were 20 in February. There were 19 for providers that took President's Day off. So we realized that that little bit of an increase might have had something to do with the billing days. But we tried to look at the revenue, the daily average revenue from the time we went fee for service on July 1st until now. And what we noticed was the average daily revenue for the state is like $69,945 a day. In March, the average daily revenue was $67,147. Sorry, y'all. What this shows is that we had great adaptability. So at when all of this kind of came down mid-March, there was a lot of chaos. So I think we're really pleased that the revenue didn't go down too much, and that case managers adapted and participated in a very market-like environment. Some of the other things that we've done during the COVID-19 emergency is adapted the service delivery in case management. We have been able to issue guidance that all required case management activities can be completed telephonically. We've worked with the Department of Health and Human Services to be able to streamline the request for additional waiver case management units. Prior to this crisis, there was a soft cap of 40 units per calendar quarter. That's 10 hours of case management. Anything over that had to be prior authorized by the Medicaid agency. During this crisis, we've lifted that amount that has to be approved by the state Medicaid agency to 80 units per calendar quarter. That can be approved at DDSN, and we've streamlined the way that case managers ask for it. So if you think about it, some states have increased case management monthly rates, and those increases were because they were asking people to do more during the emergency, right? So if I'm giving you a monthly rate and I ask you to do 5 things a month, if I'm asking you to do 8, I'm going to pay you more for that monthly rate. And so what we did was kind of the same thing. We allow people to do more waiver case management because we're a 15-minute unit during this emergency. Some of the other things that we've done is we developed.
Can I just say one thing?
Sure.
And we anticipate folks getting in touch with individuals more because of the isolation issue. We want them to make sure people are okay. We want them to check signs and symptoms of individuals who are living by themselves, or maybe even with elderly parents. That's what we want them to do. So we anticipate the contacts going up, and that we don't just anticipate it, we would like it to go up because that's what we want them to do.
Right. So one of the things that we did was we developed a monitoring tool that gets at some of that stuff that Mary was just talking about. Some questions to ask people related to isolation, related to health, making sure they have enough medication, that kind of thing. And we distributed that to case managers. We've also encouraged case managers to request active case management for people who are not connected to a case manager through another avenue. So there are a lot of people that sit on, that are eligible for DDSN services that are not receiving active case management. Some of those people have a case manager through another avenue. Maybe they are connected with another state agency like Continuum of Care, the Department of Mental Health. Maybe they're enrolled in a waiver that's operated by the Department of Health and Human Services. Those people have contact, but there are some people who are not connected. So we're encouraging providers to reach out to those people, and we reminded them how to request active case management for those folks. Your next slide is related to provider terminations. Since the 7/119 fee-for-service implementation, we still have had 3 providers who have terminated their case management contracts. The last one was August the 31st. And while we have no new terminations, we're continuing to be in contact with providers who are intending to make case management decisions in the next several months. The implementation of conflict-free case management is continuing, and it will continue to impact providers' decisions related to the provision of case management.
Lori, I think we've seen that same slide for about 3 meetings in a row at this point. I would say I don't necessarily know we need to continue to have that particular update unless something changes.
We'll just let you know if we have any new terminations.
Or indications of terminations that have gone beyond just the talking stage. But I think we've seen that slide enough at this point.
Okay. The last slide is related to the Appendix K amendment. So the Department of Health and Human Services submitted an Appendix K waiver amendment to CMS for approval on the 13th of this month. This Appendix K will allow us some flexibility in service delivery during the COVID-19 emergency. The Appendix K will be retroactive to January of 2020, and some items we've already implemented, like the case management waiver limit exception request. That's part of the Appendix K. We've also been able to issue some flexibilities around licensing, some exceptions to the timeline for abuse and neglect and critical incident final reports, the way we do contract compliance reviews, and doing some items non-face-to-face. As we went through the Appendix K, we were able to implement some things because it was determined that it was through our current purview to be able to do that without doing the waiver amendment. So do you guys have any questions for me?
I have one quick question. The number of people that were not billed went down to, I mean, that we could not bill because they weren't contacted. The number of our clients, I mean, was down to 337 in March. It was, I think, if I'm not mistaken from my notes, it was 898 in January. So I'm just asking, what was it, or 988 or 989 in January, And I don't think you've given us a number. What is it in February? Do we know?
Yeah, so I think I gave you that in last month in March, and I don't remember the exact number, but I know it was 3.48%. So it was probably somewhere around 400 and some odd,
Coming down.
yeah, it has come down is the point. So,
I just didn't know. I didn't hear it last month either. I meant to ask you last month at the same time, but I didn't. But anyway, okay. Thank you. That's all I
thank
need.
you.
Any other, Lori, hang on,
Yes.
Lori.
Sorry.
Sure, no problem. The tool that you guys put together as far as helping the case managers do the contact looks like it's had some really positive effects. Is there any thought, and this may be very premature, but is there any thought of once we're past the crisis stage, continuing to promote that or develop that so that they have a real tool that sort of says, hey, these are all the things that you can do remotely with them, even once we get past the crisis, to make sure that they're getting those non-travel billables at appropriate levels?
Sure. So one of the things that we've been working on even prior to this crisis was to develop some kind of monitoring guidance for the case managers that has real questions and real ways that you can interact with folks. Our provider network has developed their own in some locations. So what we've done is we've gathered tools from different providers around the state, as well as using some of the information that we have from other states. And we're currently in the process of doing that. I think one of the things that we have recognized with working with the Department of Health and Human Services is that this thing is not really a light switch. It's not that we're going to go from not seeing people at all to seeing people, to going back exactly the way that it used to. So, we have to continue to be creative and give case managers tools in order to be able to do their job in an environment that might be more remote.
We just went ahead and pivoted from that original guidance that that was being worked on, and pivoted to a more COVID-focused guidance that we can get out quickly.
Sure.
And then actually, we have just done one for the SLP program, which is an hourly residential program where, they have a case manager, the ratio is like 1 to 20 for that. But the case manager might not be able to get out there, the coordinator might not be able to get into those homes as often, because you don't want to have as much contact as you had before, but you still want to keep your thumb on the pulse of what's going on with that person. So this is a way to ask some probing questions in between visits. And so we developed the same tool for SLP1 that has a lot of those more health-related questions, making sure people aren't being taken advantage of. We know that our population is fairly vulnerable to outside forces. So we don't want, I always use the toilet paper example. We don't want the guy from down the hallway in the apartment complex coming and taking someone's toilet paper, or coming and take their food or their medicine, because now everybody's sitting at home, and we don't want them thinking of ways to take advantage of our folks. We need to know that stuff. So those are the kind of questions we have on the guidance. That went out yesterday, in yesterday's sit rep?
No. Oh, yeah.
The SLP1 went out yesterday. The case management went out previously.
Great. Any other questions for Lori before we let her go? Okay. Thank you, Lori.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on, the next item on the agenda is an early intervention report from Joyce Kimmery.
My big goal was to make it to the table without tripping.
Can you just move that back just a little? She's
Yeah, I know you get me after Lori, and I won't say Lori's loud, but I will say I'm quiet.
She projects.
She does, and I probably don't, and my computer has decided to freeze, but I will get there.
All right.
So, sorry about that. I will get it back up for you in a second, I promise. So what I wanted to do was to just talk to you about early intervention and where we are, where we're going, and to answer questions that you might have. So our slides come right after Lori's in your PowerPoint, in your presentation. And where we are right now is our providers billed approximately $10,000 less in March than they did in February for the early intervention 3 to 6 population. The population that we have access to, knowing what they billed, is about $849,000 and change, which represents about a $10,000 decline. But keep in mind that we don't have access to what the early intervention is billed in Bridges, which is a more substantial part of the early intervention population that we serve. We also did receive guidance from DHHS on March 30th that authorized the use of telehealth for our early intervention for their family training component, which was a tremendous benefit for the EIs because it gave us the flexibility to provide the service, with the core service of early intervention, without having to go into the homes. This was March 30th. We've also asked DHHS for some clarifying guidance. Haven't gotten that yet, but I'm sure it's coming. The main thing is that we got the non-face-to-face with the telehealth, and our consumers can continue to receive the services that they are entitled to. According to Director Poole,
You're still being frozen.
It is. Thank you so much. We're just going to.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm winging it, but I was hoping nobody could tell.
I spoke to them a little bit about our experience with EI via the Sky. I think they did it Zoom.
You did a
And
sorry about
I was doubtful at first, but I'm telling you, the session went really well because I was sitting right next to him, and he actually, it was interactive, which I didn't know because, Joel's fairly hyperactive, but he attended to the meeting, which was good. So.
And I appreciate you sharing that because we have had feedback from the EIs wanting to know, how is this going to work? And in the right situation with the right supports, I think it can work very well.
The parent has to be very present.
Yeah, absolutely. And the core component of early intervention is the parent participation. Without the participation of the parent or the caregiver, it's not family training. So I'm very excited to hear that and excited to provide that support to the early interventionist and also guidance, of how they can make the telehealth work. We also did receive a cap of units from DHHS throughout this transition process, and as far as I can tell from the early interventionists, they're making this work, and I haven't received a whole lot of negative feedback about it, just giving them guidance on ways they can make the units work. And let's see. We also wanted to talk about provider terminations. Actually, I think that our provider network is looking pretty good. We had 3 terminations since the move to fee-for-service last year. That would have been the Burton Center, Fairfield, and Pickens. Pickens, right after the move to fee-for-service, terminated their EI contract. They only had 4 or 5 consumers at that time, so it wasn't a huge deal to transition those to new providers. Fairfield transitioned all of their consumers as of March. They were carrying 11 consumers in early intervention, so those transitioned very easily to new providers. And Burton Center has decided to put their transition on hold throughout this process because they really wanted to give the families that they serve a familiar face. They didn't want to add one more level of uncertainty during this time. So they only have 1 early interventionist, about 20 children, and they are just keeping things status quo until we get through this. And good news is that we have 75 providers of early intervention throughout the state. They are serving a little under 10,000 children, BabyNet and DDSN, with about 619 early interventionists continuing to grow. We have had some providers who've experienced some furloughs and some layoffs, but also some providers who've hired staff. We have 3 new early intervention providers who've been approved to provide services, and they are just waiting to finish some new provider training. And I get calls at least once a week from people who want to be early intervention providers. So I would say that our provider network is sound and strong. We have providers in every county, and to the best of my knowledge, the ability to serve through the telehealth and through non-telehealth consumers when they come through. So that's all I have. Thank you for giving my notes to me. Do you have questions about early intervention that I can answer for you? Because I could talk all day about EI.
Any questions?
Nope.
Okay, seeing none.
All right, thank you
Joyce.
so much.
Appreciate
I
the
appreciate
update.
it. Thank you, Joyce. Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is the legislative budget update. Rob McBurney.
I muted that, I was thinking.
I have a short update because the status of the state budget is exactly the same as it was at the last meeting. That was not the intention originally, but that's what has happened. As you recall, at our last meeting, the House had completed their process, and they had approved all but 4 of our requests, of our 11 requests for the year. And, you know, the budget was in great shape moving forward, and then the COVID-19 crisis happened, and the legislature has met exactly once. In the last month, they passed what is called a continuing resolution. Each body passed a continuing resolution bill, but that was different. So in order for the continuing resolution to go into effect, now they would have to meet again. It almost is legislatively impossible for them to put a continuing resolution in place if they don't meet again and agree to a CR that is exactly the same. So that means that puts a little pressure on the legislature to either come to agreement on a CR or come to agreement on a budget sometime before the end of the fiscal year, which is the end of June. So that's where we are. That's our update. Answer any questions.
Do we have any indications at this point in time? Obviously, the budget revenue side of things will be dramatically affected. Do we have any indications at this point in time how dramatic that's going to be and where we might expect to see the impact of that?
The Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Office met last week and gave a very preliminary, very rough estimate. They took a lot of, you're having to take a lot of factors into consideration. They factored in a 20% drop in GDP, for instance, which we don't know whether that's actually going to come to fruition or not. But what it did was it took out most of the new money that is within the budget for this coming fiscal year, this year and this coming fiscal year. But that is also assumed that all of the restrictions were going to go through June 1st. So we don't know how long the shutdown of business and society is going to be. So, you know, it takes some factors into consideration that may or may not come to pass. But they're looking at basically the rough estimate was that they were going to take about a $500 million cut out of the surplus.
The governor did say in an article, did say that we would be getting back to business soon. Now, whether soon means a week or soon means a month, I don't know, but he did.
Right. They didn't give any tiered. If we come back on May 1st, if we come back on June 1st, I imagine they're working on those projections right now for the governor right now, but they did not give any of those indications. It was basically just a flat out, here are our assumptions, what we're going on. Like I said, the governor has indicated that maybe we can start unwinding some of these restrictions. I don't know. That would probably help.
Let me just ask, and David knows this a lot better than me, and you would know this a lot better than me, but isn't it much more likely in this situation they would pass another continuing resolution than it would be to pass a budget to hurry through?
Yes, if they can't come back, if they can't come back to regular meetings before the end of the fiscal year, they would probably come back sometime in May and do one more attempt. But they're not going to call them back to Columbia unless there's going to be an agreement. They're on the phones right now, I imagine, talking back and forth about what they can come to an agreement with it. But they're not. I don't think either Senator Peeler or Speaker Lucas are going to bring them back to Columbia unless they know there's going to be an agreement. So, I imagine we'll see that in the next month.
I'll bet you, given what's going on, they will demur and try to hold off until they see what resurges with the numbers. Then they'll have a modified something and expect a special session sometime in September. And whatever money comes in from the feds, they'll use that to plug in. But expect a lot of confusion for the next 4 or 5 months from the legislature, and then they come back and they do a special budget. It wouldn't surprise me at all if you saw a reconvening in late August or September with new numbers from the summer and all that. So just expect things to be somewhat chaotic and confusing, and that is not good for us because we live on certainty. And if you don't have that with all the payouts we've got to do, you probably need to prepare for a worst case scenario in case if you're a legislator on finance committee, or you're Mike Shealy or Chairman Leatherman. Well, what do? I mean, you don't know what your numbers are, and you're getting your numbers from who is it now? I think they changed the name in the last couple of years, but the number projections are just horrendous. Sales tax is just nothing, and so that skews everything. Well, how do you make up for salaries and everything else across the board? So they're shuffling around all over the place, and then that affects us somehow. I'm surprised you hadn't gotten emergency phone calls to say, what can you do to cut and all this stuff.
We've done the Ways and Means and Senate Finance Committee did ask us for our what we thought about a continuing resolution. That's what they've asked us for right now, and what we've given them is that, and I think what most state agencies are they came to the conclusion that most state agencies could make it through the first quarter with a continuing resolution without any trouble, which is why they set the new sine die date. They moved with the new sine die resolution, they moved it to September 24th is when they're
Okay.
they session can go until September 24th.
All right, that fits in with my I was just theorizing. That fits in with my
Right.
fits in with my theory
So
perfectly.
what they would like to do is do a continuing resolution and then have some time to look at those figures.
Yeah,
But they can, sign it with they did agree to push the session out until September 24th.
So could we live with those with the continuing resolution numbers? What's that going to do to DDSN payment system?
And therein lies the problem. It's not as much as an agency can't get through with a continuing resolution. It's a matter of how we actually pay our providers. It's the band system that's causing us the issue.
Exactly. Yep. So what's the answer? What are we facing the next 60 days?
Well, that's my report.
Oh, okay.
There you go. Don't steal my
I
stuff.
have no answers on that.
We are actually analyzing all that stuff right now and analyzing what the possibilities can and coming up with different scenarios on how to plug that. So, it is not a fact of the appropriation that we get. It's how we utilize that appropriation. That's the problem.
Well, one of my suggestions is the commission cut its salary in half and
Oh, I've already done that. Your donut budget is gone.
oh no. Oh, no. Why us, oh Lord?
We'll be, I'll be discussing that in my report, if you don't mind.
All
Okay?
right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Rob?
I just was curious on the two new commissioners that were moving through the process at one point and had a.
Yes.
committee
Yes, we,
meeting?
well, that was another one. We had a meeting scheduled, for the Senate Medical Affairs Committee to approve them. And that was one of the first meetings canceled, when they started the COVID-19, shutdown. So, it's still on the dockets for the next Senate Medical Committee meeting, but we don't know when that will be. So they'll be appointed, they'll be approved at Senate, hopefully at Senate Medical Committee, and then they will go to the floor the next week of the Senate and hopefully be voted on them.
Well, but they also know we can live with the numbers we have now.
Well, priorities, I guess. I think there's one thing that this whole issue has you got to put some stuff into perspective. I mean, we're not going to have our commissioners approved, but families can't hold funerals for people they've lost. And people who have worked for 4 years in college can't have graduation. And seniors in high school don't get to have, you can put all this stuff in perspective. We'll get our commissioners, at least they're named. And as soon as we can get back to business as business, we will make sure that we keep the pressure on getting them through the system. So we'll get there.
It's not a huge rush. We're fine with the numbers we have right now, I think, but go ahead.
Okay.
Any other questions for Rob? All right, hearing none. Thank you, Rob. Appreciate the update.
Thank you. I have asked State Director Baker of the South Carolina Department of Health and Human Services to be with us today because he is a subject matter expert when it comes to the federal match versus what the state match is. And I just wanted him to give an update as to where HHS is in all this process. And I did not tell him what to say. So here we go.
So thank you for having me. I'll pull this over then. Just sort of a quick recapitulation of what the department's response has been to sort of the unprecedented disruption of the healthcare delivery system in the state in a variety of different ways. I think that we first went about providing guidance to private sector providers on what allowable uses of telemedicine are. So you saw bulletins and memoranda averaging one a day coming out of the department, giving specific coding guidance and specific instruction to different groups of providers on what we were going to allow to be reimbursed via telemedicine and the manner in which they could reimburse for that. I think second, what we've sort of found shake out in that is that different provider groups have required greater levels of specificity in that guidance and instruction than others. And we are continuing to produce clarifying guidance for them as time goes on. Joyce mentioned EIs. We've gotten a lot of questions from the EI community about very specific issues with respect to how the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act is going to interact with Medicaid. We have some FAQs we'll be publishing. Today's Thursday, probably this afternoon or tomorrow, to give them guidance on that. By and large, we've left rates unchanged. So what you could do before, you'll get reimbursed for the same amount later. With respect to HHS's budget, and then I think to Senator Thomas's question, we are in a situation, I actually made a note that for a less than 5% decrease in aggregate case management claims, and I think, maybe a 1.2% decrease in EI billings, we're seeing elective hospital occupancy at 30% and 20% of what it was beforehand. So when you look at the continuum of the healthcare and health service delivery system, you all are actually faring on some of these measurements I've heard so far in the commission meeting extraordinarily well. And so I would, as you contact with the provider community, I'd put that in some context. We're seeing physicians' offices, several thousand layoffs in the hospital system because those main drivers of profit, which are the elective services, have been deferred for 30 and what will be 60 days at this point. Now, the difference for your provider community is going to be the issue of pent-up demand, and that's what we're working on with your state director now. A total knee deferred is a total knee that can be done later. A day lost in an adult day healthcare setting is a day lost. That revenue is gone. And so what we're going to have to do as we go into the second phase of this response is look at the impact to the provider network and what supports are going to have to be put in place to make sure that there's a provider network on the back end. So we submitted the Appendix K without what are so-called retainer payments. I sent a letter to Director Poole indicating that the absence of those in this first round of Appendix K does not represent an unwillingness by the department to consider them. We know financial supports are going to have to be put in place to assist some elements of your network going forward, because effectively Medicaid is the payer source. We know there's some state dollars and some private pay in the system, but by and large, we are the dominant financing mechanism, and we understand our role there. With respect to our budget specifically, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act increased federal matching by 6.2 percentage points, which was equivalent to what Congress did during the Recovery Act right before the Great Recession. For context, at the state level, not just the agency, but at the state level, if we receive that for a year, which that is unclear because the act ties the number of quarters we get the enhanced FMAP to how long there's a public health emergency declared. So as soon as CMS decides, or the Secretary of U.S. Health and Human Services decides to turn off the public health emergency, the enhanced FMAP turns off as well. Assuming 4 quarters or 12 months of this, we anticipate seeing increased revenues of approximately $426 million, of which approximately $416 million is spoken for, and we'll go through that with you. First is $68 million that goes to other state agencies, including the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs, where you will either have to put up less of your appropriation to bring down federal dollars, or in the case of the Department of Mental Health, we'll bill them for less money. I don't want to steal too much of Director Poole's report, but I anticipate one of the things she's going to say is, it doesn't do you any good if you're sending state dollars out in band payments and there's no billable activities to Medicaid. That enhanced FMAP gets eaten up by significantly decreased billing activities to the extent services are not being delivered. So if you bill less, that $426 million goes down, but your share goes down with it. Of the other components that we'll have to distribute of the enhanced federal dollars, about $32.8 million is going to go to hospitals because of sort of the way federal allocations work for disproportionate share. Disproportionate share system is where hospitals provide uncompensated care, and we give them lump sum payments on the back end. The Families First Coronavirus Response Act also requires that states not disenroll anybody for any reason during the public health emergency. We anticipate that if we have to retain folks who have normally cycled off through the end of the fiscal year and then taper them down over the course of the next year, the expense to the state will be $143 million state dollars and about $430 million with state and federal combined. We've done some rate increases for certain nursing homes that have seen direct impacts of the coronavirus. It's about $4 million. And if we're level funded through a continuing resolution, which back to the BEA, effectively what the BEA said is the surplus is gone, save about $127 million. I think that was the number. And the general fund is going to be mostly flat going forward. That was the first downward revision. So I would assume for budget planning purposes, our best case at this point is level funded. Level funding my agency with the increased cost that we've gone through in the next year is going to cost an additional $146 million. So between level funding and the enrollment freeze, that's just shy of $300 million of the 426. And then we anticipate natural economic roll-on of some children and some adults due to this period of layoffs to cost us about 25 million state dollars. So in the aggregate, all of those items add up to about 416 million of the potential 426 we could receive in enhanced federal funding. And I'll sort of stop there for questions if there are any.
Don't you think it's a high probability we won't go 4 quarters in a state of emergency? I mean, isn't it a high probability it'll only be 2 quarters or 3, which would also decrease this $416 million?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. It's both, right? So the first, I think that, and this is a piece of bureaucracy. The additional funding is not tied to the presidential or the state declaration. It's actually tied to a secretarial designation that started in January, nearly 2 months before the president declared a state of emergency. So what we don't know is, and to be clear, the law also says we get the enhanced funding for the entire quarter for any quarter in at least 1 day was part of the emergency. So if they turn this off on September 30th, we get 3 quarters. If they turn it off on October 4th, we get 4 quarters. So the date certain of the end of the declaration has as much to do with the enhanced funding as the number of months in which the actual emergency continues to be declared. And the short answer to that is we don't know, right? At this point, it is entirely at the Secretary of Health and Human Services discretion as to when this stops.
And so we really can't plan because we don't have any idea. So we shouldn't plan on spending any money that we don't know if we're going to get or not, is basically what you're saying, correct?
In short, yes.
Okay.
And we need to try to enhance the amount of billing that is done. That's the other problem.
Because he just said based on how much the billing is how much of this portion we're going to receive, correct?
So I would say your portion would be related to your billing. If your billing activity goes down, if roughly, I'd imagine 68 or 69% of your budget is federal funds that come from me, right? Probably in that area. I'm going to look at Chris. That'd be my rough assumption. Maybe a little bit less. For every dollar you don't match through billing, it effectively costs you 2 more. Mm-hmm. And so because you don't have the ability to draw down funding through my financing apparatus. So billing efficiency is tremendously important to the financial situation you're going to find yourselves in. And then the other piece of this that was sort of noted during the legislative report, there are many other financing mechanisms available to private providers and also directly to state governments. And so to the extent that the enhanced FMAP does not fill those gaps that you anticipate having, I would encourage the commission and the agency to educate itself on any fiscal stabilization funds, or for the private provider community, the Paycheck Protection Program is one that's available to small employers. They're loans, so some providers get real nervous about that, but they're also forgivable loans. And so to the extent that a provider can access a forgivable loan, I would encourage an education session, either directly or through the State Department of Commerce, to inform providers about what's available to keep them solvent, even if our financing mechanism is insufficient to do so. And then the governmental providers are a different issue, and we may be able to work some of that through the Appendix K retainer payments. But the thing I would stress is, don't believe the press releases. There are still rules, right? CMS is still expecting us to produce methodologies and get approval for all of these things. So I commend Director Poole for operationalizing a number of flexibilities in advance of CMS approval. They've read our Appendix K and have already provided us guidance. We don't think there's going to be any problem with approval. CMS broadly understands we have to act faster than the bureaucracy can give us approvals. But when it comes to major financing mechanisms, operationalizing supplemental payments to providers in advance of approval comes with risk.
We fully understand that.
Any other questions?
Well, I just wanted to, it's not really a question, but I just wanted to say that, that this is Barry Malvers. I'm a commission member, obviously, Mr. Baker. And I would like to tell you that I'm very sorry that I cannot be there to meet you in person. And because from what I can understand, I would like to commend you for your work to bring some much needed accountability to our agency that you've tried to do through yours. And I would like to let you know that many of the members of the commission are trying to do the same, and we're very thankful for your work.
Thank you, Commissioner. I would say Mary and the team have been excellent partners in being very open and transparent with us. I've had the opportunity to meet with a number of you in person, and when this loosens up again, I'd extend the same invitation to you, and of course Senator Thomas, who I got to know a little bit when I was in the governor's office, but would be happy to sit down with again and continue this work when things at least trend back to normal, if not are normal entirely. So thank you.
I will look forward to it. Thank you.
Sorry, Barry.
Go ahead.
Josh, so from the standpoint of operational, I think that Mary and the staff there is working hard. From a policy standpoint or a general guidance standpoint, is there anything else that you can foresee that we as a commission need to be focusing on? I mean, the operational billing side of things, I think is a little bit out of our direct purview and more on the staff, but from the standpoint of enabling the staff, setting up the policies, is there anything that you can foresee that we need to be keeping an eye on or need to be maybe potentially talking about?
I mean, I think the flexibilities that have been put in place for case management, and then allowing some family-directed services, we added the in-home supports where it wasn't. I think that's going to improve some of your billing and also give families some flexibility. So I think that's good things. A lot of what was in the Appendix K is sort of stuff that should have just happened, right? The controlling visitation so that you can engage in infection control. Those, I think, were perfunctory approvals that we needed federal sign off, but you all acted very quickly. The biggest risk that I see to you all right now financially is, and I don't have a ton of visibility into this on the day-to-day either, is continuation of payments for bands where services are not being delivered, shifts them from matchable to unmatchable fund sources, and greatly reduces the efficiency of your appropriation with respect to your ability to produce federal match for it. So I am not going to be prescriptive or through the Medicaid agency about what you should or should not do. I would encourage you, though, to look for matchable sources to keep providers whole instead of continuing to release band payments that cannot be matched because there's no billing activity.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Anything from staff?
All the more reason we must get to fee for service as soon as possible in every part of this agency. Okay.
It did shine a bright light on it.
Yeah.
Anything else from staff with regard to Director Baker's presentation? All right, seeing none. Thank you very much for being here, Josh. We appreciate you taking the trip over and coming out and actually being in the room, as it were.
Happy to do it. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, sir.
We actually have had a few face-to-face meetings, keeping our 6 feet apart.
Barry brought me snacks. They were greatly appreciated.
Well, now we know where the donut budget went.
Yeah.
The truth emerges.
Okay.
All right, moving
All right.
on. The next item on the agenda is the financial update. We recognize Chris Clark.
All right, guys. I'm gonna vary a little bit from what we normally cover, obviously because of the situation we're in. You have the financial update in your packet on page 95, and I'm going to cover that as typically, but make some additional comments in regards to our current situation. First thing to keep in mind, it's still a weakness in our reporting mechanism that we have yet to be able to address, but we only report expenses to you guys, and when we're in a fixed expense, for the most part, our budget is outlays of band payments to our provider network. So when you're looking at our expenses, that you don't see a lot of variation in that when we basically close down day programs mid-March. So as you look at this, and it's through the end of March, there's not a whole lot of expense variation due to those changes, which we need to figure that out, as Mr. Baker just mentioned, and I think Mary's going to mention as well in her section. So the revenue side of this is something we've really got to keep an eye on, and I'm going to speak to that in a minute. But from an expense perspective, we continue to do very, very well managing our spending plan. I still have some revisions I'd like to make to the format of this report. For example, we are still in the adjusted budget column. We are not adjusting to our spending plan, the $37 million down there that we're authorized that we don't put in our budget per se, is not blown out through every line item so that your budget actuals are more meaningful. Right now, we're comparing truly our authorization, our budget authorization to our actual expenses, but we didn't plan to spend all that to begin with. So this is something I still need to figure out how to fix, but this is what y'all are accustomed to getting. But based on that, we are running 5.1% below budget, or $39 million. I did have our budget director add that new block down there. If you look under year-to-date actual expenses, now you'll see the actual dollar amount. Instead of me just vocalizing that to you, it'll be in your report. Additionally, we continue to give you the key that Robin had asked for so that you can see what's in these various line items. We do continue to mention that our cash is not at risk, but I do believe that's at risk of changing next month. While we mentioned the FMAP, we have no indication of when we're actually going to get our check for that. And of course, our billing efficiency is really being impacted right now by these closures. So basically on the revenue side, we have done very, very well as a provider network pivoting to billing day services within a residential facility. I want to thank all of our program staff for the lead they took on that and communicating and training providers. We are going to be monitoring that very closely. We ran some reports starting March 16th through the end of March and have determined that we're leaking about $900,000 a week right now in day program billing. We expect that number to go down because as we close the day programs, we had to figure out, can we bill day services in residences, and then what's that look like and how do we document it? So we do believe that 900 is high. We have asked our provider network to give us more current data. Right now, the way our structure is, they do not submit day program data but once a month, and we do not see it we would not see April's data until May. Obviously, we can't deal with that because we need to see more current information to make projections. So we met with all of our providers, I believe it was yesterday or the day before, and we have got them now entering their data hopefully through April 10th. By the end of this week, we will then run data and see kind of where we are, more current as to, because when we looked at the data in detail by provider in March, towards the end of March, we did notice some providers were better at billing and capturing that day service in their residences than others. And so we feel like the water level as a whole will end up going up when we start looking at our April numbers. Then we've also asked them every Monday by the close of business to submit their data to us for the prior week. So we're going to be able to monitor this weekly, and we will keep you guys, updated through Mary's contact with you if there's things we need to talk about there. We also expect a drop in residential revenue because we've got a lot of families going home, family members that are at home instead of in our houses. We've also expanded the day residential vacancy period because we know that our providers are having a hard time filling their vacancies because of the pandemic and folks not wanting to expose their family members. We also feel like our at-home services are dropping as well, in particular adult day health care. We know that those are they're all in a facility, and what's the word I'm looking for? Congregate.
The congregate
setting. And so we know that those have been discontinued for the most part. So again, that hurts our revenue because we've got that money on the streets already with the providers, but we're not able to monetize it. So we've got a bunch of exposure in a variety of our services, and we are monitoring all those things and trying to figure out how this impacts us. From a cash flow perspective, again, not knowing the FMAP yet, we don't know a number or a timing on that. So not knowing that is a big question mark, but we're going to have to really look at our cash flows this coming week and next just to really see where we're at. Pat and I and Mary have been talking a lot about what our opportunities are to address this situation, and we probably will need to convene a finance committee meeting probably sometime between now and the next commission meeting, maybe sometime later this month, to discuss our options, because we do have to do something. To Josh Baker's point, is that we can't continue to put fixed dollars out there with no billing capability. And we've got to maintain our provider network, though. We can't just jerk the rug out from under them. So we've got to figure out a balancing act here. Are there any questions on that? I was going to go over the contract schedule that was in here as well under the financial update, but I'll pause here and ask if anyone has questions in regards to what I just went over.
I have a quick question or observation that I'd like staff or whoever to try to address. Is the situation dire enough or serious enough at this point to get all the providers on a conference call, or are they already geared into what we're facing, so that maybe if we have to act quickly, we're not behind the eight ball? Are we that far along, or am I thinking too morbidly in this?
No, you're not. I'll let Mary answer that.
You're just never going to let me get to my report there, are you, David?
Oh, confound it. Don't tell me.
No, that's okay. No, it's not something that we're just sitting on. We understand it from more than you know, from the provider point of view, as well as what we see here at DDSN. The status quo cannot remain. There's going to have to be a change. And that will not be done we need a little bit more data, which is why we asked the providers to get that data in quickly. The unknown right now, the variable that we don't have a great handle on is the in-home supports piece. We need to really look at that a little more closely. And then nothing's going to be done without provider input. So we will bring them together, but this is a fiscal agent issue. So it's the boards that hold the bands issue. And that would be who we need to really address this to at this point. So we will be talking to providers about this as soon as we can pull all the data together to present what we would want to present to the finance committee and to ultimately to the commission is a well thought out scenario of what we're looking at. So the best case scenario with the budget is that we stay pat, that what we have this year is what goes through next year. Again, our problem is not that revenue, not our appropriation. Our problem is our appropriation is given to us in anticipation of us using that money to pull down the federal match. Yep. If we cannot pull down that match, therein lies the problem. And our own system is strangling us right now.
And I think the providers need to be completely, it's one thing. It's like you get your allowance, think back, or you're on a salary, you get your Social Security money, but wait a minute, everything's about to change because Dad or whoever, it's gonna change somehow, or that's where the sources come from to pay you. I think they need to be. What can I say? I think we need to have a big family meeting. If they're not on board understanding what the issue is and playing with us and interfacing with us, it seems to me, I'm a newbie now, so help me, Mary. I think we're kind of walking into a brick wall, and we don't want to face that come July or June. At what point does everybody come together and you sort of have a committee? The finance committee has a committee of the whole, and I mean the whole group, providers and everybody, on maybe a 100-person conference call or bigger to sort of say, okay, here's where we are, here's what we're facing. It might have been a little theoretical before, but now we're to a point where we've got to make these decisions if you all want to keep getting paid, period. Okay, that's it. Now,
I do want to say that this system oh gosh, I don't even want to say the year. We've been talking about this since 2014. I don't like that year anymore, but we have at the time, again, I know people don't like hear me saying this, but I was a provider, and the discussion of the fact that DDSN didn't have a revenue problem as much as they had not an expense problem, but a revenue problem. They could not generate the revenue. The biggest losses at that point were being seen in case management, because we were paying out, we were not able to recoup our money. And looking at a small microcosm, we have seen what it took to remove that from a kind of a band rate, which is a capitated rate of the monthly unit for whether or not you did a service, you got this money, to the fee for service. It has not been without pain, but it's not something that folks did not see coming. We have been talking about doing it for the other services for a long time. Providers understand the mechanism on how DDSN gets paid now. We've been very transparent with that. We have not try to hide the fact that we're losing money in residential, we're losing money in day program. Prior to this mess, day program was losing money for us because of the attendance issue. We were not billing where we needed to be to break even on the service. So again,
and this has pushed us further.
This has just shown, oh my God, look at this problem. It just has made it bigger. And as it's done with everything out there, it's just made it bigger. So, and now we're in this phase of, we have to be quicker about some of the changes we're going to be making. So what we're doing now parallels what we've been working on along. We just are speeding up the time frame, and it will not be done without provider input. However, I don't think a 100-person conference call is really the best way to get the input. We'll do something on a smaller level and then kind of break down the, again, with more of the fiscal managers, the people who will actually be impacted by this, and then break it down from there, and then do that big old phone call where we have very definite options that we could look at.
Okay, a fallback then to my suggestion, which was the kind of the mega, we used to call it committee of the whole in the Senate, and that's part of the general rules that where you can kind of bring everybody into the picture to talk about it.
Right.
But here would be a fallback. It would be to put, and I think the committee, aren't the committees taped? I'm not taped, but aren't they videoed also? Aren't they available public video?
Yes.
The subcommittees, yes. Yeah.
That's what I thought. Well, you could put everybody on notice, everybody on notice that they need to be watching that committee meeting to see what to see what we're going through by way of decision, so they'll have a better heads up about the consequences of what we're facing. And I'm just wanting to get them, wake up in case you're a little bit asleep here, even though you've been warned for 4 years now, 5 years, 6 years.
We've got a few that might not fully understand. I mean, we've gotten some questions that make us wonder if folks truly understand the magnitude and where the issues are. But before the finance committee meeting is what I was talking about. We will have a meeting of the fiscal managers to come together These are the people that hold the bands, Commissioner Thomas. The
Yep.
people who hold the bands, that they're going to be coming together we're going to be working through the various scenarios with them. So
Okay.
they will, and then with their help, we bring to you the various possibilities of what we can do.
Communication is what I was sort of talking about, and making sure everybody is a very keenly alert. Here's something we're looking at. You need to watch the committee. I mean, this is something that's going to have serious consequences and outcomes, and it could be quick. You need to really be watching your own finances in case this impacts you, so that you don't find yourself, in dire straits, worse than it is now.
Right.
So
The key thing is,
Hey,
the
go
key
ahead.
thing is we've got to be willing to move fast whenever we decide what we need to do, because Chris, what is the total budget that HHS has for us? I think he said it was 69 or 70%. What is?
It'd be about almost $500 million, right? 450 to 500 million would be the federal share.
which
Now
is
that's at the old FMAP, not the enhanced level. But to your point about communication, on April 7th, we had over 140 participants on our finance call. We meet every month statewide as a finance group.
Good.
A lot of executive directors, qualified providers, a ton of attendance. We told them in that session on the 7th that they need to be prepared for some changes with their program, because we knew the problem that we had and that we weren't going to be able to continue doing what we're doing. And of course, everybody says, well, what are you going to do? Well, we don't have enough data to know what we're going to do. We've also had 2 other meetings with all the DSN boards and QPLs this month. We had one just earlier this week where we communicated the new attendance reporting expectations or requests.
We have
very
one this afternoon.
open. We were very open with them in that call that we are in a dilemma and why we needed that information and what we're going to be doing with it. Pat and I have already been discussing a lot of different variations and options. We've got to have a path forward to implement this fiscal year, because we are concerned that we can't make it through this year without doing something. But then we also need to have a July 1 plan, which will be our permanent long-term strategy. And so we're having to look at multiple options. And of course, we've always been very open and sought provider input. And so we know who our providers are that are very involved and very creative and have lots of good questions. And we would include those folks as well as others to ensure that we have as much buy-in and support as we can when we implement something and bring it to you as a suggestion.
Thank you.
We have an executive director meeting this afternoon at 2. We have a statewide call for executive directors. We haven't changed any of our meeting schedules, so communication is flowing all the time.
Okay, great.
Any further questions regarding the financial update that Chris provided? Not to step on your toes for the remainder of it, Chris, but just want to stay focused on one item at a time. So at this point in time, we'll entertain a motion to approve the update that Chris has provided so far.
I so moved.
So we have a motion by David and a second by Lori. Is that correct?
That's good.
Fine.
Okay. All in, let's say, Lori, we'll just go down and vote. Lori, if you would vote
Aye.
first, please. David,
Aye.
Barry,
Aye.
Robin.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Let the record reflect that that was a unanimous vote. So, Chris, the remainder of your update, please.
All right, starting at page 97, there is a list of all the contract amendments that y'all have requested to see. As we get closer and closer to the end of the year, we don't have amendments for $200,000 or more because there's very few days that we're adding to folks' contracts. This is an all-inclusive list of every amendment that was done in the one contracts that were going out here recently. If you go to the last page, on page 101, you'll note that they net to $50,000 statewide that we've added to contracts. Of course, we didn't provide subtotals by provider in here, but none of these went over $200,000 by provider. So as a result, we're not bringing any requests for y'all to approve contracts over $200,000 at this time. But this is the information that we think you are wanting. So if you could confirm whether this is what you want to continue to get on a recurring basis, we'll be glad to provide it.
Chris, how much of a burden was it on staff to assemble those numbers?
Not too bad. We maintain a lot of it. The issue that our contract, Deborah Leopard, does with this is she has to go through and take consumer names out of it. We provide the consumer names to the provider so they know who we're adjusting for. But when we give it to you, since it's public information, we remove that content. So it's just a matter of going through and deleting names.
Other feedback from the commission with regard to that?
Yes.
So it looked like a thumbs up from Robin. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good.
I'm good too. It's fine.
All right. Anything, David, Lori, do you guys want to add?
No, that I said it a couple of times, but yes, that's
Okay.
fine. That's what we're looking for, I think.
Great. Thanks. Chris, was there anything else from you? I see you walk away from the table, so I'm going to assume that's,
Sorry. No,
that's a
sir.
no. Okay.
No, sir.
All right. Any other questions for Chris from the commission before he steps away? All right. Seeing that, we'll move on to the next item of the agenda, which is the state director's report, including the coronavirus report. Mary, recognize you.
Okay, thank you. I plan to, I've already spoken to the commissioners about this. I plan to read this report because of the way that we're communicating to the public, that it might be easier, that it'll be attached to the minutes as it is. So I will apologize for anything that I repeat because we had this discussion prior to my report. So you might be getting some things twice. All right. There is no doubt that this virus is a major disruption in our normal day-to-day lives, but it cannot change who we are and what we do. While much of the country and even the world is in a temporary pause, our mission remains focused and our character remains resolute. We continue to support people. The staff at the regional centers, as well as our providers in the community, show up every day and support our individuals. Yes, we can see that COVID-19 emergency has changed what business as usual means. And we're adapting also. We are all now Zooming, Skyping, building business teams and sharing files, holding conference calls like never before. Our regional centers are holding virtual visits between residents and their families. It is amazing what you can do when you have to. This national emergency is nothing any of us has ever seen. And it is a threat that has some responding with fear. But I see our staff responding with determination and courage. I've attempted to consolidate the information in categories as best as I could. From the provider community, we serve 4,500 or so people in community residential settings and community ICFs, intermediate care facilities. 5 positive cases in the community, all in the community training home level 2s. Of those, 4 are in the recovery phase, and there was 1 fatality. 15 staff testing positive. I do not have information as far as their health status, but I know that there has been 1 staff fatality early in the crisis. Numerous staff and residents are currently being tested, so numbers change constantly. Getting PPEs have been a challenge, not just our challenge, it's a nationwide challenge. The 2 main mechanisms developed to procure PPEs are DDSN continually monitors and updates vendor lists distributed through SITREPs, which are situational reports, and direct providers to contact local emergency management directors and are there to coordinate purchases from DHEC and National Supply Distributions. DDSN surveyed providers and got 3 responses only. We informed the county EMD of the provider in need in that county. Providers need to understand that supplies from the national stockpile are being diverted to areas of highest need. That would be where sick people are being treated. If a county board has no one with the virus, then they would not be high on that priority list. We only have 2 counties with positive test results. The provider with the most significant incident involved 4 consumers testing positive in a community training home, and several staff were able to meet this crisis with adequate PPE and without any DDSN intervention. The second county with a positive result was anticipating some difficulty to meet the personal protection equipment needs of the staff. DDSN borrowed some supplies, gowns from Midland Center, because we don't have anybody that's sick there. And we were able to use the procured, from the same vendors were given to the providers, the procured hand sanitizers and 3 N95 masks we gave to that county. The other, we identified a neighboring county without any COVID cases who was willing to offer PPEs until larger supplies could be secured. However, the individual ended up going into the hospital, so those supplies stayed where they were. But I'm glad to report that the individual is doing well at this time. We will continue to give out the most promising sources of personal protection equipment to the provider community as we source the same for our regional centers. We continue to reach out to any provider who is treating a person testing positive for COVID to ensure that they are in possession of what they need to get through the illness. This means borrowing from neighbors, going to EMD, or taking from our centers if need be. I do want everyone to know that we are not hoarding PPEs here at Central Office. DDSN is sourcing them from the vendor list just like everyone else. Providers need to be doing the same. We anticipate the supply chain getting stronger as various industries switch gears to the manufacture of PPEs. We just gave the providers a link to an information hub, kind of a hub of sorts, which link need to supply. In preparation of Appendix K being approved and applied retroactively to provide day program and residential service settings, providers were instructed in the Thursday, March 19th situation report to start doing this. Based on the survey earlier this week, providers are doing a good job, as high as 90% attendance in the residential programs. And we have been asked for desals to be completed weekly to verify billing for planning purposes. Roughly half of our day program attendees come from residential settings. Survey shows 3% of at-home consumers still receiving some sort of day service, mostly in our enclaves or group employment. Closing of day programs individual employment. Closing of day programs has permitted day program staff to supplement residential staffing and should lower overtime in addition to providing day program in residences. We have not been told of any layoffs of day or residential staff at the boards. There has been some layoffs of staff with a couple of QPL day program providers and a couple of QPL EI providers. And we were told of a QPL case management provider saying that they've laid off 2 case managers. If any other layoffs have occurred, we have not been informed of those. We are sure, just inferring, that there have been layoffs at other in-home and adult day healthcare providers, but those are direct bill services with DHHS, and we are not in touch on a regular basis with those providers. We have dedicated staff time to contacting providers to check status. In fact, they're in touch with everybody at least weekly. The report I received, and that's via telephone, the report I received yesterday afternoon with 56 providers being contacted shows that we have only 1 DSN board who has closed their admin office. We have 37 providers who are providing day program activities in their residential homes. All 56 providers report staff is okay for now, with the following comments. One provider says, we're good for now, we're a little concerned about our nursing. Another provider says, good for now, but we have lots of overtime. So we'll be reaching out to them to see why that's happening, and it's not happening anywhere. We're not getting that report from other folks. We also had a terrible storm throughout all this. And some of the comments with regards to that issue is we apparently didn't have homes that were damaged that are housing our individuals, but lots of staff's homes were damaged. So we need to keep them in our thoughts. We had 2 homes with no power, but they had generators. And we had basically the comment was lots of neighborhoods absolutely destroyed. So the general comments, we're starting to see a few behaviors. And another comment that came across on 3 or 4 boards were getting cabin fever. And then we had one provider who liked to say that staff are doing great. They're keeping folks busy. And they had 3 or 4 exclamation points after that. So the chin is still being held up out there, and I'm really proud of that. We have a provider who has dealt with the majority of the positive COVID cases in the community with I just am amazed.
I'm gonna get back to that one. The regional centers, the PPE inventory is good when we started. Pat. Can you read that for me?
Sure.
Sorry.
Take time, no worries.
Yeah.
Start with K.
Yeah. Mary just wants to give special recognition to Executive Director Ryan Way. He had a CTH2 where all 4 consumers were diagnosed with COVID ID, had several staff that was diagnosed. It happened all of a sudden. And I think he's physically worked in that building every day since the first diagnosis. And it was just kind of it illustrates how quickly things can go from okay to bad. And I think what it also illustrated was the lightning quick contagious quality of COVID-19, where it spread to literally everybody who was in that house. But at the same time, they didn't panic. And when you hear him talk on the phone, it's very courageous to listen to him speak about the challenges. I mean, he had to get staff to commit to work there literally full time or go to a hotel because they couldn't go home to their families. And he pulled together a crew, and they basically took care of all the consumers in the setting. And I think we talked to them yesterday. I think they were out of the woods, and everybody was getting well.
They did have a fatality.
It just showed how they stepped up and the commitment was there, and they got through it. But we just want to give special recognition to Ryan Way out there.
I just want to say thank you for his leadership. It shows you what a leader can do in times of in times like this. He walked the walk. He didn't just talk the talk. He led by example, and I want to publicly thank him for the way he handled the emergency, and I apologize for that, for being emotional.
Where's Ryan Way out of?
Clarendon County.
Oh, good. Good for him.
He's a good man. The regional center update. Get myself back together here. Thank you for your patience. The PPE inventory is good when we started. We're getting a little bit better, and it really helps that we haven't had a lot of illness. We're starting to see some of it now. We were initially short the face shields, masks, and gowns, but this week everyone will have a cloth mask. All the staff will have a cloth mask. We're kind of saving our surgical mask and K95 mask for use when individuals are sick. If the diagnosed COVID cases increase, we will use the PPE, but right now we're ahead of the curve, and we're holding pat, and we're waiting for some orders to come in. We continue to order, and we ask that everybody else continue to order. Staff is screened daily upon coming to work. We do the same thing here. We take our temperature, we monitor our symptoms, and before we come in the office. Staffing is measured daily, and the report, so we know we get reports every day, knowing make sure we have boots on the ground at the regional centers, and we have. Staffing was sufficient just prior to COVID-19 and it's maintaining. A bit more call outs, but it's balanced with a little bit more overtime. Right now we have a plan for a bonus payment to all frontline staff who work directly with a COVID positive individual. At this time, 4 residents who have tested positive, all at one center and all in one dorm, all of whom are being treated at the center utilizing proper protocols. At another center, we had one individual who had contracted the illness while he was in the hospital, and he was COVID negative by the time he was returned to the facility. We have 3 additional individuals from the first center that has the 4 people that already have the virus that are being tested. We're awaiting the results. DHEC is doing our testing. They came in and did the testing. So we're awaiting the results from DHEC. So at this time, we have 4 positive staff results from all our centers. Please know that the numbers change constantly. These are numbers I have at the moment. There's a lot of testing going on all the time. We had a scare the other day, like a report where there was a fever and throat pain in 4 individuals at a community residential care facility.
just to find out that it was strep throat, not COVID. So
Yeah.
all we can do, and all the providers can do, is stay vigilant with signs and symptoms and do testing ASAP. You've heard some of the collaboration we've had with DHHS, this response to the waivers through Appendix K. The purpose is to ensure continuation of services through modifying requirements to facilitate and increasing services to meet needs during the crisis. The Appendix K was submitted by DHHS to CMS for approval on Monday, April 4th, 2020. Approval for other states have been fairly short, certainly less than a week. Retroactive to January 1st, the K will end at the termination of the state of emergency. We've already implemented a lot of the flexibilities, like telephonic visits to complete plans, provisional licenses, and extended training periods. The K includes flexibilities for service provider licensing, training, minimum monthly service requirements, provider qualifications, staff, and service locations. One of the things we want to make sure that everyone knows, that all our families know, that no one's going to receive a waiver termination during this crisis. So usually you have to have two waiver services provided during the 30 days. But what we're saying now is that you do not have to have two services. That's why case management service, getting in there with case management, is so crucial at this time. Certain service limits have been increased. We're supplementing services, for example, respite and personal care for a closed day program or adult day health care. We've added home delivered meals for those displaced from adult day health care where meals were provided for them. In-home supports have been added to the ID/RD waiver and the HASKI waiver, and allows family members to provide the services. Waiving timelines for fingerprint checks with certain assurances and family members providing services for their loved ones. Exception to A&E and critical incident reporting timelines. We don't want you to think that they don't have to make these reports. They do, and they do have to have the final reports. And they can't get an extension without requesting one and us reviewing the circumstances. We don't want to let down our guard when it comes to abuse and neglect and exploitation reporting. Contract compliance, our QIO, we're doing desk reviews only. We're not going into the homes. In other words, we don't want other people coming in other than the necessary staff. Modification of level of care assessments to a non-face-to-face methodology. There are no retainer payments at this time, as Director Baker said, that we are looking at this. We're looking for the duration and intensity of the issues that we're having before we get down to we might need to supplement those things. Once the K is approved, it'll be needed to be operationalized. That's when you start talking about the devil being in the details. So changes can be rolled out as efficiently and as quickly as possible. Since we first gave DHHS our ideas for Appendix K, we've been working on every one of those things as if they were going to need to be operationalized. So we've been working on something called the Appendix K Action Plan. Now that we have the final draft, we've been putting the finishing touches on that plan. Pending any changes, because we're still waiting for an approval from CMS, we may have to change the plan once again. Once the K is approved by CMS, we'll make the changes to the action plan and we will forward all that to the commission members. Please know that the Appendix K can be amended based on the duration and the intensity of the pandemic. So this is not a one and done. You can actually go back and ask for additional items based on the fact that if this thing's over in a week, you would not go do that. But if it lingers on, we may have to go back and ask for additional items. The situation report, then now this next section is talking about communication. As former Senator Thomas and Commissioner Thomas alluded to, the situation report, and we call it the SITREP. This again is Pat Malley creeping into our vernacular language on a daily basis. So the situation report, affectionately known as the SITREP, has been our main avenue of communication. It is sent out when we have information that needs to go. If it's one item or 10, if it's something that needs to get out to the provider network, it is sent. All subject matter monthly work group meetings have continued, such as EI, case management, quality management, and our finance director's meeting. The finance director training will continue as planned. We have quarterly provider ED meetings. In fact, we have one today. We will schedule statewide calls when something important needs to be communicated quickly, as did the call we had on Tuesday with regards to the need for them to do their data. The day program data needs to be submitted on a more frequent basis. We follow that up with a memo and then include the whole thing in the SIP rep. We hold weekly central office Skype meetings with employees working remotely, kind of to bring the group together to make sure we all know we're still working together. Our remote workforce varies from 77 to 79% daily. We do have to be above, at or above the governor's target of 75% of our central office staff being remote. The majority of our executive team is physically here daily. Obviously, we have no one at our 1,500 regional center employees working remotely because you cannot do direct care behind your computer. The Emergency Operations Center phone line and email is monitored 24/7. Rob McBurney carries the email and phone responsibilities through the week, and on the weekends, those duties are split between myself and Mr. Britt to give Rob a break. We have a fairly robust COVID-19 webpage, which we've had there's so much stuff on it now, we had to organize it into categories. And we are always looking at things to add and looking for ways to make it even better. A communication weakness we notice has been to communicate our communication directly to our consumers receiving services. We have total eligible individuals of 37,852 as of this moment. And we have a lot of folks that receive they don't receive any services, about 16 or 17,000 of those people. So we've identified this as a problem. We want to be able to reach out to them. We've started with case management, saying if you've got folks that might need a contact, you haven't heard from them in a long time, go out there and reach out to them and contact them, and we'll get you Medicaid target case management or state funded case management somehow. But we need to have a proper vehicle to facilitate our communication directly with our service recipients. We have found that to be a weakness in this communication link. So financially, we know that the 6.2 FMAP increase and the purpose of that, and I thank Director Baker for coming to speak, and I think he spoke to that quite eloquently. We need to leverage that increase to offset the losses we are experiencing with our inability to bill for services not being rendered. Currently, COVID-19 is causing major havoc in our band system. For example, at-home day program has been reduced to 3% for a few employment enclaves, which creates roughly a $750,000 loss of Medicaid billable revenue a week, or $3 million a month. This is just basically on our best guess estimates from the information we currently have. This is not a loss to the financial managers, the boards who are our financial managers. It is a loss to DDSN. Through May 1st, we estimate a loss in day program billing of approximately $5 million. We can't fill with 6.2% FMAP increase much further than that date. On July 1, if everything gets back to normal on July 1, we can accept the same. We have to ask ourselves some questions. Can we expect the same billing patterns to generate income to support the band payment? Will everything go back to normal the minute they flip the switch and tell folks you can go back to normal? We're not sure. Will families send their individuals to day programs, or are they still going to be fearful? We have no idea what the attendance is going to be after this thing switches gears. So without further study and a little bit more information, we're not going to be able to figure out how to close the $600 to $750 million loss we have every week. So that, to the larger discussion we had before, we are going to have to get on that. We're going to have those tough conversations. The providers will be brought in on that. We're working on a solution to the issue. When we will be including our providers in discussion, and we will be including DHHS in that discussion. We'll bring it to the commission once we have a few plans and a few ideas as to which way we need to go. We also know that shutting down the economy is going to leave a mark. There's no way around it. So we might say that we anticipate budget cuts. I think we have to anticipate them. If they don't come to fruition, great. But if they do, we at least have a plan in place. The last little chapter of my novelette here. No, actually, I have two more. No offense. COVID and our day-to-day operations. The one thing we've learned from this experience is that we continue to learn every day. We just continue to learn every day. Things change. The landscape changes every day. We didn't even know about an Appendix K when this whole thing started, even though it's been there apparently for a decade, but we sure do now. We continue to learn, develop, and rethink what we need to do. Trying to focus the policy side of the house that has been overrun with Appendix K implementation, SITREP development, and plan changes. Well, what do we need to do with them? We need to look for ways to refocus their attention on projects that have still been in the hopper, like our backlog of policies. There'll be a realignment of duties for a few members of that department so we can get back to some pre-COVID projects that need to be completed. We'll be tasking our emergency operations team with the following: review and revision of the current DDSN emergency management plan, review of the provider's emergency management plan. There isn't a requirement that's been there like as long as I can remember to have their plan submitted to us annually after it's been reviewed by the county emergency management division. We have found that many plans were not submitted or did not contain a pandemic section or were not reviewed by the county EMD. As the oversight agency, we should have been reviewing these all along. So the fact that they're not there is on us. Many of our providers have developed fantastic working relationships with their local emergency management divisions. However, we now know that quite a few others have not. Our EOC leaders will be working with county boards and QPLs to begin developing that relationship. We have learned through this that relationships are forged in good times and relied on in bad. Without them, it is difficult to get the supplies you need. We are investigating methods to call, text, or email statewide messages to those who are eligible for our services so we can maintain contact with them. In conclusion, which I'm all sure very happy to hear that part. In conclusion, DDSN remains steadfastly committed to those we support, their families, our staff, and the provider network. This national emergency has only strengthened that commitment. I am deeply grateful to our dedicated team of direct support workers, frontline supervisors, nurses, and all who provide support to our folks. I am grateful to all our central office staff who are working both here and in the office remotely. I am thankful we have a good working relationship with our sister agency, DHHS. And I am deeply appreciative of our commission members who are aware of the changing operations and are supportive of the actions we took to protect our individuals and staff. They are getting bombarded with SITREPs, emails, texts, and phone calls, and they review our plans and actions and give us support to our efforts. I am grateful for them for their ongoing oversight of our work and for the commitment to the agency and our mission. Joshua 1:9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Good God, what is wrong with me? Pat. You're probably much more worthy of saying this than I am. Can you please just read Joshua 1:9?
Joshua 1:9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go.
Yep, Pat's much more worthy of that than I am. But thank you. That's all for me.
Does anybody have any questions with regard to the update and the state director's report?
I just wanted to clarify. I think at some point in there, Mary said we were losing 700 million a week, and I think that's supposed to be 700,000 a week, right?
Right, 700,000 a week. I'm sorry. It'll add up to that 5 million very, very quickly.
And And you said 3% of the day programs are operational, that's it? Actually having people?
It is 3% of the people that are from the community that are still getting services. The residentials, the amount of residential day program units being served, it looks like it's close to 90%. I mean, I'm sorry. Yeah, residential day program. The people that live in residential programs that go to the day programs, the staff from the day programs are providing those services in their residential facilities because we can't congregate in the large groups. So they're providing those. That's kind of the one that we can keep going. It's the people that live at home that we can't all bring into one location. And you can't provide those services one-to-one. It's not economically feasible.
And so I think the 3% represents people who are
Still working on lawn crews. They're coming in, they're doing that kind of stuff. That's still going out because those are small groups of people, usually less than 4.
I mean, it's your fault. I really didn't.
Any other questions?
I know, but I'm saying that's how, you know. Okay.
I just want to thank Mary for making sure that we're included in the communication. She's been calling me fairly regularly and obviously sending out the sit-rep reports to the commission members as well. So I want to thank Mary for her efforts in making sure that we're updated, if not daily, certainly every other day. It feels like we're getting information in.
Dee, you might call that either.
I'm thankful for that as well. I think she's doing a wonderful job with communication. I really do.
We are trying, and I thank Sandra for, she backs me up all the time. Make sure we get those things out.
Any other questions or comments?
I want to thank the staff for being so patient with me to get me up on live. It was a miracle.
Actually, it was. Everybody, it has gone off without a hitch. The only thing I think that the only comment I've gotten from the audience out there is we need to mute the microphones when we are not speaking. That would be the only thing. But other than that, the report back from I've been asking folks that are out in the audience that are listening remotely, how's it going? And they've been pretty much positive about that.
Well, for an experiment, it went off basically without a hitch. So
yep.
Good to see that we can do this when we need to. I'm not aware of any issues that are required for executive session. Does anyone else have any issues? Okay. So the next regularly scheduled meeting is for May 21st. As we get closer to that date and we know exactly what our situation is, we'll clarify exactly what the mechanism is for us doing that and how we're going to accomplish that meeting. But that date from the now will remain the same. Seeing no other business on the agenda, is there anything else to bring forward at this time from any other commission member?
Not for me.
No, sir. Thank you very much.
Seeing none, would then entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move that we adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Second from Robin. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
We're not the motion to adjourn. We're not going to require a voice vote, a roll call vote. So
we only need one.
That is unanimous. Just let the record reflect that. So, all right. Thank you, everyone. Everybody, stay safe.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You too.
Right.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.